Hello, hello, hello. The promised Dogman hunting video interview has finally come. And if you're ready to hear some crazy stuff, then you are in the right place. This will probably be split up into parts and put out in a series because I have a feeling we're going to be talking for a couple of hours. And I want you guys all to be able to catch all of it because there is going to be a lot of good stuff. We've got a lot of information. As always, you may hear my husband on the tractor or the dogs barking. And this is real life on the prairie here. And there's real things going on all the time. So thank you for showing up. Make sure to hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I am being shadow banned. So if you can share this out to somebody, I would really appreciate it. And without further ado, Wiley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, glad to be here for Dawnita. We've been trying to get this. Wiley Dave Fritts. I'm really known as a professional predator caller and hunter and stuff, but I got into all this stuff by accident, and then when I got into it, it just snowballed from there. It seemed like it went, once you do something, it takes off. Dawnita can speak for that on her own self. It just starts happening, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just starts happening. So, what part of the country are you from?
Now, what was that
and
again?
A little bit of your background.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born and raised in Tulsa, but I didn't stay there very much because when I was I was I was one of those kids that were outgoing, did everything. I was always off riding my bicycle or doing stuff. I got into my dad got me into hunting, shooting bows and shooting rifles and stuff, and I've been shooting guns since I was a little kid. And a motorcycle racer. And did that when I was younger and stuff, and just never did give the hunting up. I stayed all into that through school and everything. And then I got into welding school. My dad worked at American Airlines, and then so they had a welding school out there. It was like a Explorer Scout program. And I got into that thing and then, learned to be a professional welder. And then after I graduated from that school, they asked me to run it. So I ran it for a while and then went out on my own, started contracting and stuff, and kind of did what Paul does. I was everywhere, working for everybody. And then the hunting deal exploded for me. It got to be just one of these things where, you kind of have your niche and then it all of a sudden takes hold. And so I was hunting coyotes. I started when I was 13. About the time I did when I was in the welding school, and I called my first one on my grandpa's farm. And so once I did that, I was hooked. I really liked doing that because it was something that, it was cool that you could attract those animals and make them come right to you. So I got to where I was really looking at everything, every aspect of that, getting into it. I read everything I could read on it. And I explored how they made the calls, how it all came about, of the whole history of predator calling. And then got into competition where I was calling in, where we go out and see who could kill the most coyotes on these ranches and stuff. And I just kept getting better and better. So pretty soon I was calling professionally for some of these call manufacturers. And so, I was promoting their stuff and doing different things at these shows and things. And when I was shooting for Remington. And so my dad, he said, you're taking these calls apart. I go in there in the kitchen table and have all my stuff scattered on there. And my mom, she'd been there beating on me because I had the whole house took up with all this stuff, and scattered out. And I'd be take calls apart and put different ones together and make different sounds. And so my dad said, well, man, you're really making your own series of calls. Now I said, well, man, we ought to just make our own. So, my dad was a machinist. So he said, okay. So we bought a lathe and a mill and all that stuff. And we got it all together. And Dad and I started making these calls. And boy, it took off. It snowballed from there, and I got pretty famous building calls. Pretty soon, I was building calls for other people and making them for the other call manufacturers, and that some of them I'd worked for. And then what they call nowadays, these guys, they call it what they call an e-caller, which is the old days, it was a tape deck where you go into a studio and make a sound and put it on a cassette tape, and then you had a player and it would play the coyote sound, or however, me and Paul talked about that quite a bit. And it would make the different animal sounds. And some people used them just for photography, but mostly it was for hunt purposes. And dying rabbits, dying goats, animals in distress, because that's what brings predators. And I would make these different sounds. And so I sold a lot of tapes and stuff. And then they got into the e-collar, which is the guy that really started that was a guy named Murray Burnham in Marble Falls, Texas. And I was fortunate enough to meet him and be friends with him. He kind of me and he liked me. And so he taught me a lot of stuff. And I got to meet all the big guys in calling. The only one I didn't get to meet was Johnny Stewart, because Johnny had passed away before I had a chance to meet him, but I did get to work with his son, and I did a lot of work for Johnny Stewart back when I was doing that type of thing. And so, but when I got into the electronic call deal, I seen Murray was making one of those. It was called a CompuCaller, and it was a computerized call sound. So he was really the father of doing that. And then when everybody got on board doing it now, it's all digitized, and everything's done in a studio now. And so some of these companies would fly me to a studio, and I would take my calls and I would mimic the sounds of these animals. And then they would put them on that sound chip and put them in those little machines, and the guys go out, and that's how they call them in nowadays. So some of these people that's out there blowing, they think it's a call, a rabbit, and making these sounds. It's actually me in that little box. And some other guys have done it too, but in the old days, they actually killed animals and made them scream and do stuff like that. Well, that you and I both know that's inhumane. People don't like that. But in the old days, they didn't frown on it too much. But nowadays, we wouldn't dare think about doing that. But I was so good at it that I didn't know I was that good. I was at a university, and a sound engineer was playing a rabbit sound on the console where he was recording me in the studio. And he come on my headphones and said, "Hey, would you come in that studio? Come in here for a minute. Let me show you something." So I go in there, and all these people are in there, and he says, "I want you to look at that screen up there." So it's kind of like, when me and Paul talked about, you look at electrical soap, when you see electrical waves on there, and Paul can look at something and tell what's going on with a piece of equipment. Well, the same thing is with sound waves. Everything is a frequency. That we our voice, everything, we live on frequency. That as well as I do. Even channeled the things that we're going to talk about. Some of these things with the realm in the spiritual realm, it's a frequency. But the engineer showed me that. He goes, "I want you to watch this." So he turned it on. He turned on, this is a real rabbit. He turns it on. Then he turns on my sound that I just done, and it was almost spot on. You could just tell the sound was perfect. He goes, "How are you doing that?" I said, "I don't know. I just blow the calls of what I know the rabbit sounds like. I mean, I've heard him scream in real life." He goes, "Boy, we must have an ear for it, because look at that." He said, "That don't lie right there." And he said, "You're right on the money." And that's why I could never figure out why, when I would go call sometimes, I would bring a coyote or a bobcat in. So the rabbit was actually the animal I was mimicking, would come to the call also. And that's, a lot of guys don't see that. But when you can do that, you're actually, it's not any better. You're making the real thing happen. So I was able to sound like these animals. And I think that's how I got into what we're going to talk about. I sounded so real that they think it's the real thing. I've killed thousands of coyotes and and called them in for photographers. And I did work for National Geographic. I called in some coyotes for them for a TV series that they did and some other stuff. And they would just, they couldn't believe I could do all these things with these animals. I even got to where I could talk to them in their own language. I could howl and bark at them, and they would come in and do the same thing I was doing on the call. So that's how this all started, and that's where it went from there.
I know whenever you are raised, and of course we're on the other side of Oklahoma, but when you're raised with the animals and you're raised out in the wild and with the hunting and the fishing and stuff, it seems like the children pick up those noises really easy. It just seems like they do.
Well, I was a musician too. My dad, he was a fiddle player and he played guitars and all that stuff. He taught me to play. And so I had an ear for music.
Yeah. Because Kristen, she can play any instrument that she picks up, our second one. And she can talk to the animals too.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I would take my wife, Julie, I'm married to, she's not been with me a lot, but she went out with me one night, and we were standing there at the truck, and I had Lance and Bill with me and a couple other guys there. And so we just stopped, and I just got out and started calling. And in less than 4 minutes there, I had like 2 coyotes and 4 deer within 50 yards of the truck. And they were all around us, and so the coyotes in the distance, I would bark and howl, and Julie, she likes me to talk. She likes to hear me talk to him. So I would call at the coyote, and he'd call back to me, and I'd answer him, and he'd answer me back. And then she thinks that's the coolest thing ever, to hear that coyote talk back to me. And but I was able to do that, and the guy that I used to hunt out there with, he's passed away now. He was a football player, played for the New York Jets. And Dennis Bird, a lot of the people here in Oklahoma will know who he is because he's kind of he was a public figure and everything, but he was kind of Oklahoma treasure. He was one of the guys that, lived in Oklahoma City, and he went to TU, and he was kind of just a country boy. And then he came to the city, and so him and I got together at a gun show, and he was into coyote calling, and I taught him to do some of these things with these coyotes. And when we were together, we did some stuff out there that would just blow people's minds. And sometimes we didn't have it on film. I wish we'd have had a camera instead of a rifle, because they would have paid big money to have some of that stuff on film.
Yeah, definitely. It's a little bit handier now that we've got a camera on our phone in our pocket, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you just don't have it on at the right minute.
Yeah, we'd have to pack. Of course, back then, a lot of this digital stuff, we were coming into the digital age, so we had hands-free. We had headsets the military used, like Special Forces had. We had a headset. Dennis and I could talk to each other away. He'd be 50 yards from me, and I'd be away from him. I could say, "Hey, I got a coyote coming over here. He's got one coming over there," whatever. That way we could talk between each other. We didn't have to haul back and forth. And we experimented with a lot of that stuff. And of course, we're dragging cameras and tripods and everything. And I mean, there's times we just went out there just to take pictures. We didn't even think about shooting anything. And him and I together did some really neat things with coyotes. So when we got to where we didn't hunt much with each other anymore, it was I kind of missed him being there, but some of the stuff I wish I'd have still had him there for the things that I seen later on, because Dennis was a real good Christian guy, and he would tell me things about the Bible. I mean, he knew a lot about it, and we going riding out there. It's a long trip, from where we live to where you guys are, and we talk about that, all things about the Bible stories and how the disciples did things, and the giants, and what Jesus did was all through the land when he was teaching people and stuff. And people don't realize that, like today with what we're dealing with, all this stuff, if they look back, no matter what we look at, it all ties back to him and what went on. You can't cross any of it anywhere where he's not involved in it, because he, as well as I do, he made it all.
That's
And there's a
right.
lot of people that don't want to realize that or admit that, but it's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're basically like, whenever you go back to Genesis 6, is really what it's talking about. And then the book of Enoch goes into deeper detail. I was going to pull up specifically because when you're calling coyotes, sometimes you get a little bit more than coyotes coming in. And so I was going to pull up these verses here. We've got First Chronicles 12:8, and the Gadites were separated. They're separated themselves unto David into the hold to the wilderness, men of might and men of war fit for battle that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions and were swift as the roes upon the mountains. So one of the out here, we don't have like men with the faces of lions necessarily, but having the face of a lion or the face of a dog or something like that is not unusual. It is something that has been in the Bible. And then Ezekiel, whenever it's talking about the angels at the throne, the cherub at the throne, they had, the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an eagle, and the face of an ox. So, this is in the Bible. And whenever some of these creatures came down in Genesis 6 and mated with women, well, some of the Nephilim that were created more than likely looked like this. So that's where we're kind of going with some of this. And then
this got so well, okay, like I was gonna say, I was raised in the city, but I didn't stay there a lot. When I started hunting and I could start driving by myself and had a truck and stuff, I was always in the country, man. I was out there. I was calling coyotes or trying to figure out a way to make a new call or something. And I was just ate up with this. And it's just, and people that have never seen it, they just want to go with me just to watch what I did. I'd tell them, I'd say, well, I can blow this call right here. Now there'll be a coyote come out of that bush. Oh, how do you know that? Watch. And I used to, another guy that I hunted with, Ralph Valentine, he's passed on since he lived up in Kansas. He's an old Kansas farmer. And he was my partner when I won the world championship in 92. We was in Arizona. We won the championship the first time we entered it. And Ralph used to tell people, he said, well, that's where I got the name when they started calling me Wiley. When I was younger, he said, that kid can drive down the road and just whip the Jeep over right here and say, right here, and step out and call a coyote in. He said he just had a knack for where I could look at the ground. He said, Ralph used to tell people, he said, I think he's like a coyote vending machine. You drop in a quarter and it pops out of the ground. There it is. And so there was not very seldom times that we didn't do that and we had something come up. But the thing about, like you talked about there, predator calling is kind of like fishing, but you're not using a pole. I mean, you blow that call and anything that eats for a living, that has to make a living out there, hears that sound, says, aha, jackrabbit sandwich. I'm coming in for a free meal,
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for. So, and the coyotes are always hungry, like a dog. A dog's always hungry. You may just feed that dog, and 5 minutes ago you fed him, but if you walk out there with a sandwich, he wants a bite of it. This is because you got it. I need to taste that,
Yeah.
And if you have to make your living constantly looking for food, then they don't pass up any opportunity. And
right.
These things that we're dealing with now are, they really eat a lot of stuff. So, I mean, you're looking at, they have to have a deer to eat or they'd have to have 10 rabbits a day or whatever, because it takes a lot of calories to support something that big, and the first time you see something like this, and after you've done everything I've done, I would, I even down when I was down, I hunted down in around Tallahena, Oklahoma, down there in the Kiamish Mountains. And I'd walk down those trails in the dark with a bow in my hand and climb into a tree stand in the mountains and not give it one thought about what was going on. And we didn't know these things was in the woods with us, you know?
Yeah.
And so after you learn what's going on, you go back home and you sit there and you think, man, Lord, thank you for protecting me. Cause I could have been toast over there, you know?
Right.
That's why I told some of those guys when they interviewed me about when I saw the Dogman the first time, I said, I think we all got gray poop on in their back pocket. They're just waiting for you to come by, you know, so they can smear it on you. And you would just be at their mercy. You can't do anything. These things are so big. If you don't have some kind of a big weapon, you're in trouble. I mean, man, it's like the giants, you know, David dealing with Goliath. Look at what you're facing.
Right. I was going to pull up some of the images that you shared with me here.
Yeah, that's a track right there that come out of the Sabine River that we got in Texas.
And you got this track, or somebody else did?
A person brought that to us. A friend of Julie's mother had some people that lived down there, and when they found out that they knew me, they brought that up here and had they wanted me and Lance to make a casting of it. So you need to give that to him so he's got it, because that's the one we found down here at our place. So,
okay. Okay.
You know, and
this is a cougar.
That's a mountain lion that I land in Arizona.
And this just kind of shows how well they can camouflage themselves, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you didn't know what you was looking at and you looked at that tree, you wouldn't see it for a minute.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it if you didn't know for sure what you were looking at. You can go back and look at the picture and later see it.
Right. And for a long time, when I interviewed with these different researchers and stuff, and people, scientists and people that what was going on, they didn't know that these things use the trees like they did. And that's just something in the last 5 or 6 years that they've realized. And you know who David Paulides is. He wrote the books Missing 411. You know, he's the Bigfoot guy that talks to all the national parks and stuff where people's come out missing.
Okay.
And David, he doesn't know me, but David had come up with the same scenario that I did. He tried to say, he said there was more reports than one of people, Yellowstone, Rocky Mountain National Park, Great Smoky Mountain National Park, all Daniel Boone National Forest, all these different parks across America have people missing. And they would say there was a row of hikers coming down the trail, and there was like 9 people in single file going down this trail. They were all hiking, and they're going along there doing their thing. And all of a sudden they look back, and the last guy that was back there is not there anymore. And they go, where'd he go? He just vanished, you know, and couldn't figure out how that could take place, and they wouldn't hear anything. And I told a buddy of mine way back, I said, I know they're using the trees, because they're probably up in those trees, and then, you know, they have long arms, and all they have to do is just reach down and grab somebody, and they can pull them into the tree, break their neck, and they got them. That's it. Yeah. They would never see them. They'd never know. And the how I found out about that for sure was the guy that I worked with for years was a coon hunter. And he told me this story. And he said, don't ever use my name, because I don't want people to think I'm nuts, because that's what they'll do. But he told me, he said he was hunting in Arkansas. And him and a guy that he knew for a long time, is black guy's name was Bobo, I guess. Anyway, he said he went hunting with him. And he was a great coon hunter. The guy won more championships than the law allows. And they're getting their dogs ready to go out. And so they're putting their overalls on and everything. And they let the dogs out of the truck. And they said they didn't hardly even get their overalls snapped up. And the dogs, you know, they thought they struck a coon. So they get their lights ready, and they run into the woods and run down the trail. And the dogs are all around a tree there, and they're trying to climb the tree. And he said he put his light in the tree and he couldn't see anything. There was no raccoon, no eyes, no anything, you know. And what these guys will do, he used to use my calls. In a competition, these guys they'll make what they call a coon squall. It's kind of like a little bit different sound than a coyote call, and I can sound like a raccoon on one of those real easy, but that's what they do, and they make that coon look at the judge, and so how long the coon looks at him, what it does, they judge. I guess they judge him on all that stuff. Well, anyway, Jim said he'd done that, and he said no response, and then all of a sudden he heard something in the tree, and this boa guy said, "Oh, it's big and black." Said, "Oh, they've treated a black bear. They got a black bear in here. That's what it is, you know." So the dogs were trying to climb the tree. So he walks up there and he said he snapped up his dog on the lead. They're trying to pull the dogs back. And so when they pulled the dogs off the tree, this thing came out. Never touched the limbs. It just slid down the bark and hit the ground. And when it did, it was a Bigfoot. And
wow.
You know, of course, they were all they got is 22 rifles, you know, and they're standing there and this thing's 9 or 10 foot tall looking at them and it's gigantic. So I guess his dog lunged at the thing from off his lead. And he said he hit that dog so hard, open handed, it knocked it 30 yards into another tree and jerked the lead out of his hand and knocked the dog out. And the thing just kind of looked at him and snarled a little bit and it said they were looking at it, they thought they was going to die. And he said it just walked off into the dark. But he said when it hit the ground, they felt the ground shake.
Wow.
And he knew then, he was a believer then, you know. He said, I heard the stories, but never believed it. And that's the way I was. I'd heard stories all my life. But, you know, you go, oh, man, that's a crock. That's not real. And I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was a kid. My dad took me to see that and everybody's seen that film. That's alive nowadays of the Bigfoot walking down bed in California. And I asked my dad, I said, you know, that's when I was a kid. I said, Dad, you think that's real? He said, well, it looks pretty real to me. He said, I think that'd be pretty hard to fake. And that, you know, it's never been disproven. It is real Bigfoot walking on film. That's the first real clear picture that they had of one. And that's what started all this business. People looking for them and National Geographic's deal, you know, and everybody digging into it and stuff. And that's still the most revered film today.
I
and
think
we've got, I think, a little better videos, but we still have them.
Yeah, I think I've actually, was it this one? I don't know if I don't think it was. I think there was a brush.
I think that's a different one.
I pulled up some interesting pictures, and it's hard to know with AI these days what's real and what's not. I found this coloring picture. I'll put this and I've got some friends that like to color and have children, so I'll put that in the group.
Right.
But we had this one. This was at Amarillo at the zoo.
Yeah. Yeah. I got that when that first come out, I got that the second it come up on the internet. I got that a guy sent it to me. He goes, hey, look at this. He goes, is that what you saw? I said, yeah, pretty much. I said, but mine was black and mine wasn't white.
Yeah. And you don't know with those black, you know, those night cameras, if maybe
that's probably night vision lens, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, that doesn't tell you what color it actually was. But I think it was snowing. I think it was in the winter. No, it says May. So yeah, it's hard to say, but and then here's some Bible depictions of
see people, you know, Paul and I talked about this. People would go, they ask you, well, where do you think these things come from? But I said, well, okay. I said, have y'all ever watched? There you go. That's the
that's the one
right there.
That video.
That's Patty, what they call Patty. Yeah. Yeah. That's Roger Patterson's film right there. And that's the real thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
But these people, they've tried to discount that every way. Now, Jeff Meldrum, he's a scientist that he lives in Idaho. He's a worked at the university there. And I met Jeff, and I got his book and stuff, and I met him at one of these festivals, and we talked extensively. And he studies the footprints. He's got more tracks than anybody alive. And he said, I asked him, I said, Jeff, this would be very hard to fake, wouldn't it? He said, extremely hard. He said, you would have to know more about the anatomy than Jesus himself, because he said, he showed me footprints that had dermal ridges and different breaks in the foot. Who would think to build that, Dawnita?
Right, exactly.
That much
You
time
can tell the fake one. Like yeah, because the footprint that Paul said, he's always differentiated it. He's like, it's not like what they show Bigfoot footprints to look like. It looked like a human footprint, just a lot bigger. So
yeah, and when I asked Paul about the one he found, I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, I stood there scratching my head for a minute. He goes, nobody around here's got a foot that big, but he knew what it was. He said, well, I guess they're real, because when you see something like that, it makes you think, hey, I'm living right here where these are,
Yeah, and the one that he saw, that footprint was only, 5 miles from our house?
Yeah.
I think he's back 20
inches is a big foot. Yet.
Yeah. And then the one that Catherine saw was the other direction from our house. She actually saw a Bigfoot that stepped over.
That one Catherine seen was a monster. It was a big one.
Yeah, it was a big one because it just stepped over.
I wish you could have got a picture of it. I'd love to seen that one.
Yeah, she caught it in her headlights.
Well, people don't think, okay, like the area where you guys live is considered high desert. Okay. And this is an area where you would look at that land driving down the road and go, there is nothing out here. I mean, this place is, there's nothing here. It's just a road going to a bunch of sand hills. But if you could fly over the place and look at it, it's kind of like the moon, because there's so many anomalies and different things that people don't see, and it'd be easy to hide something out there. Very easy to hide.
Yeah, there's a reason why the outlaws were out here.
Yeah. And yeah, I had a guy, I worked with this guy. He worked with my dad at American, and he was my welding partner at another aircraft shop that we worked at. And Rock, he's a great deer hunter. He's really a good rifle shot and a good hunter and stuff. Good Christian man. He's one of my best friends, and he's a great guy. And Rocky, I used to tell him, I'd say, hey, it's just a matter of time. You're going to be out there and you're going to run into one. He goes, Dave, he goes, come on, man. He gigged me about that. And I said, okay, we'll kind of laugh about it. And then here it's been, I guess, it was after I saw mine. I told him, I said, you're going to, he hunted down by Talahina, right down there by Honobia is where he hunted, where the famous encounter of the siege of Honobia happened. And I know the guy that shot that Bigfoot, Mike Humphreys. I met him and talked to him, and so I hunted there. I was actually hunting in a deer camp down there with my dad on a place that some guys that we worked with from that construction company, and they invited us to come down and go hunting with them. And we were in that camp hunting when Mike shot that thing. And so word traveled like prairie fire around there. Somebody shot a Bigfoot, and there's all this controversy. Oh, looking at it, they shot a bear and they're just trying to get attention and all this stuff, but it was the real thing. And when people live in those mountains and they haven't seen one, and you're kind of scared of it or scared of them stories, your mind wants to tell you it's not real. If you can convince yourself it's not real, you don't have anything to be afraid of. And so that's what a lot of them do.
Yeah.
But these things are walking around out there through the mountains and the woods all the time. They're out there. And if they want us to see them, we'll see them. If they don't, we probably won't. And we see them by accident sometimes. Like Catherine caught that big one. I mean, that's a rare deal that everybody wants to see. And she just got really lucky to see that one right then. That was a
she's had
great
a lot of
sighting if she'd.
those. I think some of it is, spiritual discernment. I think God gives some people a spiritual discernment to see things that other people don't see. I've run into that all my life, and
that's what I have the same thing, and I didn't know that's what it was when I started seeing these things and started happening to it. But my mother told me, she goes, "Look, you're not like everybody else." She goes, "We knew that there was something different about you when you were little, but we didn't want to tell you because we didn't want you to think you're better than everyone else." And of course, I never think that. I think I'm not as good as a lot of people. But if I think what it is what you told me. If you have, first of all, to see things continuously like we have seen them, you have to trust the Lord and know He's real and know that He's actually there and He is in control of everything. And if you trust Him and you got His back, then when things happen, He's going to let you see stuff so you can see what's making things go around and answer a few questions. He doesn't give us every answer, but He give us a lot of them. And a lot of people said, I've had people walk up to me and goes, "Oh, well, you're full of it because it says in the Bible, He told us everything." I said, "No, He told you everything He wanted you to know at that time.